optimistic that an agreement can be achieved. Nobody's going to get 100% of what they want, but let's make sure that middle-class families and the American economy, and in fact the world economy, aren't adversely impacted because people can't do their jobs.
We are engaged in discussions, the Majority Leader, myself, and the White House, in the hopes that we can come forward as early as Sunday and have a recommendation that I can make to my conference and the Majority Leader can make to his conference. And so we'll be working hard to try to see if we can get there in the next 24 hours.
I just feel like the Republicans every step of the way have just been so intransigent, and they have now been, they're now really getting left just holding the bag with nothing. So
Charles, the onus is on Speaker Boehner.
Exactly, and the reason that Republicans have been recalcitrant and haven't agreed to any of this is because, as Kirsten has said, the Democrats are getting everything they want, which would make a Republican think twice about approving something where the Democrats win everything. It seems to me right now that we're in a position with McConnell negotiating this, that something reasonable is likely to come out. McConnell is a master deal maker. In 2010, he's the one who fashioned the deal with Obama after the midterm election that extended the tax cuts for 2 years and brought us where we are today. So I expect, look, he's so good, I think if you gave him a weekend and he were in charge, he'd solve the Syrian civil war. So I think he and Reid will come up with a package, probably raising the limit at which you have to pay higher taxes. But it's got to be kept simple. I think if it's that and unemployment, what will happen is Boehner will have two choices. If he refuses to allow a vote, and the president was really hard on him in the statement he made just a half hour ago, then he will be the scapegoat, he'll be responsible, and that'll be a disaster. That's an option that he would exercise if he thought that the deal was awful. But what I think he will likely to do is to have an open vote, not to have his caucus, the Republicans, have to vote one way or the other. And that way you'd get 180 Democrats. You only need about 25 or so Republicans, and you get a majority. And it would be behind him. And then after January 1, you get around the cliff, then he's got a stronger position because the debt ceiling is approaching and it gives him a stronger hand.
Are you saying that Republicans would vote against a tax cut for 98% of Americans? I mean, is that what you're saying? I mean, if it's just they're only going to get 20 Republican votes, I mean,
look,
how politically does that play out?
It depends on where you put the income level.
The reason that Republicans have opposed it all the way along is because there is no commensurate spending. There's nothing on entitlements. It's all about raising taxes on the rich. And Republicans who are elected to hold the line on taxes and to cut spending, I think, have a good argument in saying, I'm not going to support something that does nothing about entitlements.
I'm just raising it as a political issue. I'm just curious how that plays out, you know, where you vote against tax cuts for 98%.
Well, you make a point that it all depends.
It is a matter of principle, which occasionally intrudes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and the president has staked his ground today. He's not going to back out if the Republicans agree. And what McConnell will do is, as he negotiates the limit at which you pay higher taxes with Reid, he'll check with Boehner and say, if it's at this level, can you give me 50 Republicans? If the answer is yes, then it'll go ahead and it would pass.
And we're back with the panel for the Friday lightning round. First item up here, the longshoremen strike apparently averted with a 30-day extension of the continuing contract. This had potential to have a huge impact on the U.S. economy. A strike by 14,000 longshoremen from Maine all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And
what's astonishing is how small a number of people are involved here. Less than 15,000 for all the ports you showed on the map, the entire East Coast and the Gulf Coast. In the 60s, there were about 10 times as many. And today, you're working with a tenth of the force, handling a lot more cargo, which is a testament to automation and to the container revolution. In the 1960s, New York and New Jersey alone had twice as many longshoremen as you have in the entire East Coast and Gulf Coast. I just think it's amazing that you would have had that small a number of people who could have had that huge an impact on the economy. I think it'll likely end up being settled, but it is a testament to how well we've done with our productivity over the last 50 years.
All right. Yeah, Charles, when you look at Putin's pattern of jailing pop stars, of poisoning KGB, former KGB agents, or murdering journalists, is he getting more paranoid?
Well, look, he's an old he's a Russian spy, a Soviet spy. That's who he is essentially, and he's continued the Soviet system, but without the ridiculous communist ideology. It's a police state. It's not as bad as it was in Soviet days. But he's turned it into a dictatorship, and his contempt for the United States just shows in this. This is a loathsome act, and he did it as a slap at the United States. All this silly stuff from the control, the papers about how the death rate of children in the United States. That's Soviet-style propaganda, but it tells you what an abject, comical collapse we have in Obama's reset policy, so heralded with the Russians. I mean, it isn't only that when Putin ran, he ran on an anti-American level, I mean, arguing against the United States, speaking of Clinton as Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, organizing demonstrations against him. And then in the policy world, supporting Iran against us on the nuclear issue, and talk about loathsome, supporting Assad in the genocidal war against his own people. Last week, he supplied diesel to the tanks in the Assad forces, which were requiring it. So this is a guy, our policy has been a complete failure in respect to Russia. Well, I think he did. I mean, he was, of course, a war hero in the Vietnam days. He was tremendously successful leading Desert Storm. But in addition, I think it was a seminal event in our history in that it restored the prestige and the affection that Americans have of the American military, which had suffered horribly in the Vietnam days in the 70s and even into the early 80s. And I think that was a turning point.
He had kind of a Churchillian quality. Churchill said, we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them on the landing zones. He said, we're going to go around, over, through, on top, underneath, and any other way it takes to beat him. I always admired him for that.
His briefings on the tube were
right, we got to go.
Masterful.
We got to go.
This has been a Sunfish production.